My name is Claire Walsh. I'm 35 years old. And last spring, I discovered that I no longer exist. Not officially. Not digitally. Not legally. I've been deleted. I'm not exaggerating. I don't mean metaphorically, like some poetic heartbreak nonsense. I mean, my military ID no longer scans. My social security file, gone. My name vanished from every official record. Like I was never born. No digital trace. No past. No future. And as if that weren't enough, 3 weeks later, my little sister Emily sent out wedding invitations. The whole extended family was tagged in engagement photos. Old college roommates. Even estranged cousins from Vermont. Everyone was invited. Everyone but me. And that's when I knew this wasn't just betrayal by the government. It was betrayal by blood. Before I take you into how I got erased, how my family turned their backs on me, and how I got it all back in one terrifyingly beautiful act of revenge, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and comment if you've ever felt silenced, erased, or underestimated. Because this is not just a story about revenge. It's a story about recognition. And trust me, you'll want to see how it ends. To understand how deep the cuts went, you need to understand where I came from. I was raised in Catskills, New York. In one of those traditional New England houses. White columns, wrap-around porch, seasonal wreaths, and an unspoken rule: keep the image intact. No matter what. My mother, Helen Walsh, was the matriarch. Elegant, controlled, judgy as hell. She believed in two things: social presentation and obedience. My father, Arthur Walsh, had money and manners but very little backbone. He nodded more than he spoke, mostly to avoid conflict. And then there were us. Me, the oldest, strong-willed, disobedient. Emily, 2 years younger, pretty, agreeable, everything I wasn't. From the moment Emily could bat her lashes and curtsy on cue, she became the daughter worth bringing to brunch. I, on the other hand, was told I was too intense, too opinionated. I asked questions. I refused to do ballet. I wanted combat boots, not satin slippers. I enlisted at 18. Not for glory. Not even for purpose. I joined the military because it was the only way I could get far enough from my mother's voice and close enough to a life I could actually call mine. I climbed fast. Became an intelligence officer in a unit called Vanguard. Special operations. Black Ops missions with zero room for error and even less for conscience. And still, I sent postcard home. Still showed up for holidays. Still brought gifts and tried. But I was always that daughter. The one who couldn't make it to Emily's dance recital. The one who refused to wear pearls. It happened 6 months ago. We were on a high-risk operation in Western Maine, targeting a data laundering server site disguised as a hunting lodge. The mission was clear: retrieve the files, destroy the server, extract clean. But then, we found civilians inside. 3 kids, 2 elders, a whole family sleeping in the basement. Collateral. Apparently. Command told me to clear the site. I refused. That moment changed everything. Reed, Marcus Reed. My commanding officer berated me on the encrypted channel. You're endangering decades of national security over farm trash. He spat. I stood my ground. I extracted the family first. By the time I returned, the data was gone wiped. Reed blamed me. 2 weeks later, I was pulled from the field. 4 weeks later, my clearance was revoked. 6 weeks in, I was a ghost. Naldis misal notice. No court-martial. Just silence. At first, I thought it was a glitch. But then, my military pension stopped. My health insurance vanished. My credentials were listed as unverified entity. That's when I reached out to an old friend, Tasha Raymond. Tasha had left Vanguard after a surveillance mission left her legally deaf in one ear. Now she works in private defense tech, basically a black market watchdog. She ran a deep scan for my files. And what she found chilled her. Claire. It's not just deletion. Someone replaced you. With a Sharon Monroe. Same birthday. Same ID. Different face. I'd been overwritten. Wiped and replaced. In every official system. I no longer existed. And no one, not even my family, seemed to notice. But someone did notice. And that someone wasn't an ally. He was sending out wedding invitations with my sister's name on it. And my name conveniently removed. Coming up next. The wedding. The betrayal. And the plan I swore I'd never have to make. A month after Tasha's discovery, I got a package. No return address. Just a pale ivory envelope with a wax seal. Pressed with the Walsh family crest, 2 overlapping oak leaves, and the words Fortitudo et Fide, strength and loyalty. I knew what it was before opening it. Emily's wedding invitation. To the world. It was a classy announcement of a picture-perfect union between Emily Walsh and Matthew Reed, son of a wealthy Connecticut attorney. To me, it was a scarlet flag. A coded message from my past. Because the venue listed on the invitation, the Hollow Pines estate, used to be a black site. A decommissioned Vanguard satellite hub turned luxury retreat. A place no civilian should know existed. Reed would know. He had orchestrated dozens of our early ops from that very building. And the last name of Emily's fiancé, Reed. The same. At first, I tried to convince myself it was coincidence. That it wasn't Marcus Reed's son. But a quick search confirmed it. Matt Reed. Ivy League. Shadow government consultant. A sanitized version of his father's legacy. And Emily. Emily was marrying into it. I stared at the RSVP card for what felt like hours. Not because I was debating going. I already knew I would. But because there was no checkbox for my name. No blank for Claire. In my family's most public moment in a decade. I didn't exist. Just like in the federal databases. Just like in Vanguard. I'd been erased twice. Once by the system. Once by blood. I called my mother. She picked up on the third ring. Like she always had. Cool and clipped. Claire. She didn't sound surprised. Not relieved. Not guilty. Just. Efficient. Yes. It's true. Emily is getting married. She spoke as if reading an itinerary. I asked why I wasn't invited. Her silence said everything. And then Claire. You've always been complicated. This day is supposed to be peaceful. Let's not stir old waters. I laughed. That bitter, body-emptying kind of laugh. You mean, let's not tell the truth. She didn't respond. Not directly. But she added. Before hanging up. Don't make this about you. And that was when something inside me cracked, not shattered like the moment I realized I was erased. Not snapped like a combat reflex. No. This was slower, heavier, a burning ember at the base of my spine. The kind of pain that doesn't scream, it simmers. And simmers. And simmers. Until it finds purpose. I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't storm in like a vengeance junkie. I wouldn't yell or flip tables or cry. No. I'd do what Vanguard trained me to do. I would infiltrate. I would expose. I would unravel everything they tried to wrap in white lace. That night, I met Tasha in a parking garage just outside of DC. She slid me a drive. "Everything you need is on here," she whispered. "Blueprints, guest lists, surveillance feed logs, and—" she hesitated. "Proof that the Hollow Pine server core is still active." That last part changed everything. Because if the core was still active, and Reed was involved, it meant the wedding was more than a ceremony. It was a cover. A data exchange. A digital laundering event disguised as a matrimonial merger. And my sister, willingly or not, was the courier. Tasha warned me. "Claire, if you do this, there's no going back." But there had already been no going back the moment I read the words Mrs. Emily Walsh Reed without my name anywhere in sight. I nodded. "I'm not going to ruin her wedding," I said. "I'm going to ruin their illusion." The next day, I called Moth, a former Vanguard surveillance technician who now freelanced as an ethical hacker. He owed me. I once pulled him out of a blown extraction in Jordan by carrying him 3 miles on my back with a shattered femur. He didn't ask questions when I explained. Just said, "Send me the files. I'll ghost your trail." Over the next week, I trained. Not with weapons. With control. With restraint. I rehearsed my posture. My get. My voice modulation. My facial muscles. Because the Claire that was erased had to stay erased. The Claire that would walk into that wedding would be something else. Something more precise. A ghost with perfect timing. But the most dangerous part, I didn't know if Emily knew. If she was just marrying into a dynasty. Or actively participating in the illusion of my deletion. I replayed every childhood moment between us. Every time I shielded her from Mom's expectations. Every time I gave her my silence so she could shine. Was she blind? Or did she choose to look away? That question haunted me more than any classified operation ever had. And I needed an answer. One only Emily could give. But I wouldn't ask her with words. I'd ask her with truth. In front of everyone she loved. At the one moment she couldn't run from it. Because sometimes, the only way to be seen again is to walk straight into the spotlight they built without you. The first thing I had to accept was this revenge without clarity is just noise. I didn't want chaos. I wanted precision. And most of all, I wanted the truth. Not just for myself, but for everyone who had ever been silenced to protect someone else's power. I flew to New York under a fabricated ID. Teresa Lee. Events, photographer. Moth had generated the credentials. Complete with an online portfolio. Background checks. And social media trail going back 3 years. I had no intention of snapping bridal portraits. But having a camera around your neck still made people ignore you. That was the first rule of infiltration: you don't hide by running. You hide in plain sight. Hollow Pines was even more polished than I remembered. The moment I stepped onto the gravel drive, I felt it, the weight of illusion. Fairy lights wrapped around century-old trees. A fountain imported from Italy. Linens so white, they looked fictional. All carefully curated for Instagram. Press releases. Legacy. It wasn't a wedding. It was a broadcast. A branded declaration of power between two families that profited off disappearing people like me. As I walked the grounds during setup week, pretending to test lighting angles, I memorized security routes, blind spots in the camera coverage, and most importantly, the server port access beneath the reception stage. Moth's file said it was still operational, disguised as an AV distribution node. From there, Reed could piggyback encrypted payloads into federal systems and overwrite whatever he wanted, including full deletions of mission logs, field records, and even personnel like me. I needed a trigger, something that would expose the real-time use of that system during the wedding. Something dramatic, undeniable, and public. That's when I had the idea to use the wedding's live feed against them. The event was scheduled to stream online to over 300 guests who couldn't attend. Moth could hijack the stream for approximately 20 seconds, just long enough to splice in encrypted video clips, footage he'd recovered from my final mission, with full voice comms. Timestamp it. Location verified. It would show me refusing the kill order, Reed demanding silence, and the moment I was blacklisted. But 20 seconds isn't much time. I had to create a perfectly timed distraction during the ceremony, something loud enough to stop the music, freeze the guests, and focus all attention on the screen. Tasha suggested a stage light blackout. Moth suggested setting off a proximity sensor. But I knew none of those would hold. So I chose the riskiest option. Me. On stage. With a mic. I would walk into that reception not as a phantom, not as a guest, not as a mistake to be ignored, but as the sister of the bride, uninvited, unrecognized, and unforgettable. Still, part of me hesitated. Not out of fear. I'd led battalions into missile zones. I disarmed bombs under sniper fire. No. It was the kind of hesitation only families can cause. What if I was wrong about Emily? What if she really didn't know? What if, beneath the curated guest list and the designer dress and the silken smiles, she was just surviving, like I had, like we both had. On the third night before the wedding, I watched her rehearse her vows from a distance. Alone. No cameras. No bridal party. No audience. She held the paper in shaking hands. She cried after the third paragraph. And I realized she wasn't acting. She was terrified. Of what? I didn't know. But she wasn't the villain I'd imagined in my darker moments. That changed nothing about what I had to do. But it did change how I wanted to do it. This wouldn't be a takedown. It would be a reckoning. I drafted my speech 3 minutes. Every line deliberate. Not melodrama. Not pity. Just truth. Stripped and raw. Words they could deny, but never unhear. Moth prepared the stream intercept. Tasha would distract the coordinator long enough for me to step into position. And I would time my entrance for the exact moment the officiant asked if anyone objected. Cliché maybe. But some moments earn their cliché. That night, I stayed in a motel room 10 miles away from the venue. The sheets smelled like bleach and old dreams. I lay there in silence, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing my lines in the dark. I thought about my childhood bedroom, how Emily and I used to sneak glances at each other during dinners when Mom went on her passive-aggressive monologues. I thought about the first mission I ever led, how I wrote her name on my helmet under the words, "Stay human." I thought about the moment I stopped existing and whether this would finally make me real again. I didn't sleep. I didn't need to. Some battles require rest. Others require resolve. When I left the motel at dawn, I looked into the cracked bathroom mirror and whispered the only mantra that ever truly anchored me. If they don't give you a voice, build your own frequency. The car ride to the venue was quiet. No music. Just the sound of wind. And the ticking of a digital clock counting down towards something irreversible. I pulled into the gravel lot 2 hours before the ceremony. I wore black. Clean. Sharp. Tailored. Not mourning. Not hiding. I wasn't a guest. I was the interruption. And I was exactly on time. The first time I walked into Hollow Pines. I was 27 and still in uniform. Vanguard had commandeered it as a secure facility for field communications. Back then, the walls were bare. The windows blackout sealed. And the only scent in the air was burnt coffee and static tension. Now, the place smelled of rosewater, aged wine, and polished legacy. Gilded mirrors reflected guests in pastel dresses and pressed tuxedos. String quartets replaced radio chatter. And no one knew that underneath the ballroom stage 3 feet below the feet of the bride and groom was a humming server node still tethered to an invisible web of corruption. I slipped through the back corridor. Camera slung over my shoulder. A guest badge clipped to my lapel, borrowed from one of the hired tech staff. Thanks to Tasha's careful interference, I made it through the first checkpoint with a nod and a smile. The second checkpoint security before the ballroom barely looked up. Photographers were background noise. And I'd made sure my presence became static. Familiar? Invisible. Inside, the atmosphere pulsed with artificial joy. Crystal chandeliers cast soft gold over linen-covered tables. People sipped champagne and practiced laughter like a rehearsed language. At the center of it all, Emily stood beneath an arch of white hydrangeas and silk. Her gown delicate and cathedral length. Her eyes distant. The officiant was mid-monologue. The kind of long-winded matrimonial speech filled with faux wisdom about partnership and sacrifice. And behind him, mounted on a towering screen, was the digital canvas they'd use for live projection photos of the couple, video montages, and the upcoming live stream for virtual guests. It was my window. And it was narrowing. In my earpiece, Moth's voice buzzed through. 10 minutes to intercept. Tasha's in place. She just pulled the AV guy to deal with a looping sound issue. You're clear for your drop. This is your countdown. I scanned the room. Reed was there, of course. Standing beside the groom. Hands folded. Eyes alert, despite his forced smile. He wore power like a second skin. But he hadn't seen me yet. That would change soon enough. I waited. The officiant asked if anyone objected. It was time. I stepped forward. I walked slowly. Deliberately. Camera still at my side. No one noticed at first. Until the microphone screeched slightly. Until Reed's head tilted. Until Emily looked up and saw me. For a fraction of a second. Her eyes widened. Recognition. Then confusion. Then something else. Not fear. Not anger. Something quieter. Like relief she didn't know how to process. I stepped onto the platform. The crowd began to murmur. One of the bridesmaids turned. Gasped. A ripple of discomfort spread across the room like static. I took the mic from the stand. Hi, I said. Voice steady. Cutting through the silence. My name is Claire Walsh. I'm Emily's sister. I wasn't on the guest list. Because I'm not supposed to exist. People laughed nervously. A joke. Maybe a wedding toast gone rogue. But I wasn't smiling. I took a breath and continued. 6 months ago, I was erased. From government records. From military systems. From my own history. No notice. No hearing. Just deleted. And I could have stayed gone. But then I saw where the ceremony was being held. And I realized something terrifying. This isn't just a wedding. It's a transmission. At that moment, Reed stepped forward. Claire. That's enough. His voice was calm, commanding. But there was a flicker in his eye. A crack in the facade. He wasn't prepared for this. No. Marcus. I said, facing him fully. You don't get to speak anymore. Not until they see what you did. I looked directly at the screen. Moth. No. The lights dimmed, not completely, but just enough for the projection to take full focus. The first clip played. Me. On field camera. In Vanguard gear. Refusing to give the all-clear for a sight strike. Reed's voice came next. Cold. Clinical. Proceed anyway. Authority override. Eliminate all evidence. Then a pause. And my final transmission. There are children here. I will not give that order. Gasps echoed through the room. Another clip. The official report filed afterward falsified data. Blaming me for a compromised op. Signed and approved by Marcus Reed. Then silence. Back in the present. I turned toward the guests. You're not just attending a wedding. I said. You're attending a cover-up. And the bride, my sister, was being used as the courier. The dress she's wearing wired with a transmitter embedded in the stitching. It was meant to carry out the final overwrite during the live broadcast. A beat of chaos. The coordinator screamed. Security lunged toward me. But Reed didn't move. He was frozen. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't in control. And then Emily stepped forward. She raised her hands. Stop. She said. Voice trembling. Let her speak. Everyone turned. Even I did. She looked at me. Tears in her eyes. You're right. I didn't know everything. But I knew something wasn't clean. I knew the way they talked about you. It didn't make sense. And I stayed silent because I wanted peace. I wanted a perfect day. Her voice cracked. But I don't want perfect anymore. I want truth. And then she turned to Reed. This wedding is over. The room didn't erupt into applause. There was no cathartic standing ovation or swelling music. Just silence. That hollow, shaking kind of silence where people don't breathe for fear they might shatter the air around them. Emily stood in the center of the stage. Bouquet limp in her hand. Mascara streaked down her cheek. But her voice clear. Final. This wedding is over. She didn't yell it. She didn't need to. When truth is finally spoken aloud, it doesn't need volume. It has weight. Matt Reed didn't say a word. He looked at his father. Then at the screen. Then at Emily. And that was all. He walked off stage. Out the side door. Disappearing like a shadow retreating from the light. Marcus Reed stayed. He tried to salvage the room. Started talking about classified context and misunderstood operations. But no one was listening anymore. Because the screen didn't lie. The voice on those tapes didn't lie. And worse than anything else, my presence didn't lie. Security hesitated. They waited for instruction. But who do you take orders from when the chain of command has just crumbled in front of 300 guests and a live stream audience? I stepped down from the stage without resistance. My knees didn't buckle. My hands didn't shake. The fear had burned out somewhere in the execution. All that was left was breath. Breath and fire. Outside, the clouds were starting to roll in. Not a full storm. Just the warning kind. The kind that stains the sky in muted gray. Like, even the weather is holding its breath. I walked to the edge of the property. Behind the hedges. Past the guest vehicles and catering vans. Tasha was there. Waiting beside a nondescript black SUV. She nodded once. Clean exit. Feeds gone viral. Reddit. Twitter. News sites. Someone screen recorded it. She paused. Then smiled. Just barely. Welcome back to the real world. Claire Walsh. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like survival. Which, in my world, is already a miracle. 3 days later, federal investigation into Marcus Reed officially opened. Charges were sealed. But word leaked that several of his contracts had been frozen. The Pentagon issued a public statement about reviewing all data-related field operations. Emily. She vanished from social media. Last I heard, she booked a one-way flight to the West Coast, changed her name, and started volunteer work with displaced veterans. She never contacted me directly. But she didn't have to. Her last words on that stage were more than apology, they were rebellion. And rebellion is its own kind of love. My mother sent me a letter. Handwritten. 3 pages. No apology. But in her old cursive handwriting, there was something close. A memory. She told me about the first time I stood up to a school principal at age 10 when a boy was punished for something he didn't do. You said, if the truth is inconvenient, maybe the rules are broken. She ended the letter with that quote. No love. Mom. Just the sentence. I kept the letter. Not because I forgave her, but because in her own cold, complicated way she finally acknowledged who I was. Tasha and Moth helped me set up a foundation, the Frequency Initiative, a quiet nonprofit that supports whistleblowers and investigates silent erasures in government and corporate databases. Our first successful case was a medic dishonorably discharged after refusing to falsify a battlefield report. He got his name back, his benefits, his voice. Sometimes, I still wake up not knowing what version of myself the world sees. The sister, the soldier, the ghost, the disruption. But I've stopped waiting to be defined by their comfort. Because erasure isn't just about being forgotten, it's about being made inconvenient. And people will always try to forget what makes them uncomfortable. That's why you have to keep showing up. A year after the wedding, I returned to Hollow Pines. It was abandoned. Torn vines on the front gate. The scent of damp wood and moss. I stood beneath the empty archway where Emily once stood. Where I once interrupted a legacy built on lies. I closed my eyes. Took a breath. And let the silence settle, not like a weight, but like a promise. Some ghosts come back for revenge. Others return to tell the truth. I was never just the erased sister. I was the one they couldn't delete. And if you're listening, if you've ever been made small, invisible, dismissed, know this. You don't need permission to reclaim your name. You just need a moment loud enough to break their silence.